Welcome, everyone. This is Joanne Geer. I'm the Executive Director of the BioPharma Research Council. We're going to just take a moment before we start our presentations, and I'll tell you a little bit about our organization. The short version is that we're an association for scientists throughout the biopharmaceutical industry, including industry, academia, nonprofit, government, and supplier labs, and I'd like to say, and the people who love them. A lot of what we do are various programs that bring together researchers across the different silos and across different functional groups. So, for example, we do a lot that help bring IT people together with biopharmaceutical people to learn to communicate with each other. Would you like to go ahead to the next slide, please? Just going to show you a few of our upcoming programs, and everything that I'm going to show you is on our website, which is biopharmaresearchcouncil.org. On August 12th at Rutgers University, we're going to have basically a meetup, a little networking session. We did a big conference called D2D, Data to Drugs and Diagnostics, in June, and we'll be revisiting this theme from time to time throughout the year. Would you go ahead, please? We have our next webinar is also a Thursday, that's August 21st, and this is really interesting. It's a HIPAA-compliant, patient-centric care, really, collaboration system that works through smartphones for patients in many different categories to track their own compliance with taking their medications, how they're, any effects that they're having. And what's interesting here is that the different caregivers can actually collaborate with each other in real time, so that the specialists and the GPs, whoever someone's working with, can all have the same information. Let's move on to the next slide. In October, we'll be at Research Triangle Park in North Carolina. This is the third time we're running the Triangle Biotech Research Symposium. It's a one-day program, really, to invite the whole community to come together and share what they've been working on. This time we'll have a real focus on partnerships and collaborations. I think if you go to the next slide, I think we have we have other things in the works, but I don't want to take any more time now. But just want to show you the kinds of things that we do. We're always welcome folks who'd like to get involved, either on committees, program suggestions, and so on. So feel free to work through our website. We'll be following up with you. I already had a question whether today's program is going to be recorded, and the answer is yes. And we hope by tomorrow it'll actually be up on our website. We'll send you a note with the link. Feel free to enter questions at any time. We're going to have 3 brief presentations in a row, and then we're going to have discussion and conversation for the rest of our webinar. On the right-hand side on the console, you'll see a section that says questions, so you can just type right in the box, and we'll pull those all together at the end of the program. So I think we're ready to begin. I'm going to introduce Mike Jornitz, our first speaker, who is the Chief Operating Officer of GCON Manufacturing. He is a distinguished technical expert with close to 30 years of experience in bioprocesses, especially sterilizing, grade filtration, and single-use technologies. He has published multiple books, book chapters, and over 100 scientific papers. He's a member of the PDA Science Advisory Board and Audit Committee, and an advisory board member of Artemis Technologies, Bioindustry Council, and multiple scientific publications. He received his master's in engineering and bioengineering at the University of Applied Sciences in Hamburg, Germany, and accomplished the PED program at IMD Business School in Lausanne, Switzerland. Mike.
Thank you very much. What I will talk about briefly, we have a very short time frame to go through our presentations. I will talk about flexible biopharma manufacturing and give you a 20,000 feet view of what's new and what's upcoming when it comes to manufacturing and clean room structures. It's just a typical delay. Oh, here we are. So when we look at past and current facilities, we all know them: traditional hard wall, facilities. It takes 4 years to build them, around $400 million. It's not just building, but the entire validation and qualification of such site. It's very high capital expense. It's not very flexible. Very often these facilities are actually product dedicated, and after 10 years, 20 years after the product life cycle runs out, these facilities are often mothballed. Then there are modular facilities, and nowadays a lot of people talk about modular and sync it also to flexible. Modular stick built, for example, they can be built in shell buildings very rapidly, and are interconnected with their clean room or HVAC ductwork, and become with that really again a more traditional facility. And then there's the container type of based systems. Most of the time it's actually synchronized with PharmaDual, and again when you assemble these systems to one block, one facility, it becomes again a more traditional facility. So it's a real long time to run. It's very often product dedicated, and from a standpoint of flexibility, when we always talk about flexibility, they are more or less fairly inflexible, these facilities. What is flexibility? Flexibility really means scalability as well as multi-product purposes. When it comes to past and current processes, on the process side, not the facility, but process side, we really move away from the six-pack of large volume bioreactors more and more to single-use medium volume bioreactors, 2,000 liter, for example, a multitude of those, and then again moving into a single-use process. But Morris will actually talk in more detail about the single-use processes. But when it comes to single-use technology, what we have to be aware about is single-use processes are great, but often they're kind of like try to be implemented in traditional facility layouts. And that's when suddenly the single-use technology flexibility and speed is again hindered by a typical classical layout, as you can see on the left-hand side. So we really need to look into new layouts, facility layouts, which accommodate single-use processes and enhance the flexibility of these processes. What we have right now, or what the needs are of the industry, is really more flexible facilities, pre-assembled systems, pre-assembled clean room systems, for example. And this is a quote by Alain Prolon from GSK, a very nice quote in my opinion, because it's rightfully so. Modular facilities have reproduced really traditional architecture, and we need to be more smarter in future and have a look at what is out there, what can be done in regard to newer facilities, how can we become more flexible, and how do we accommodate not just new processing technology, but also needs for in-country, for-country productions. So the future possibilities is really gaining the full efficiency of the single-use technology, create autonomous clean room spaces, not interconnected ones, but autonomous clean room spaces which have their own air handling system, for example. Maybe movable infrastructures which are also fast deployable, prefabricated units, so we can actually build a shell building in parallel to that clean room structures and move these in once the shell building and the utilities are implemented. Clonable facility platforms, so that you can actually have a cookie cutter principle and clone these facilities, and with that also the qualification validation, and reduce your timeline, your time to run of that facility. It's also more regulatory inspection friendly, because when the regulators know one of the facilities, they know the others which are cloned. And again, we have to look into new processing spaces when it comes to new treatment options, for example, personalized medicine. So we have to really look into smaller volumes and more rigid aseptic processing, because often you cannot sterilize by filtration or heat sterilize the samples, or the reconstituted cell samples. So therefore, we have to look into new biomanufacturing possibilities. This is just an example of a future facility platform. You can see on the upper right a 2,000-liter monoclonal antibody facility lined up, all single-use, enhancing the single-use process. And then below, it's actually an oral solid dosage form facility. Again, all these systems are autonomous, segregated clean rooms, which have their own containment option and can be also vaporized hydrogen peroxide sanitized so that you can run multiple products through that facility. And the next part would be like how do we can scale that type of flexibility. And as you can see in this instant, the corridor system is actually included in a pod structure, and then one brings these pods and moves these pods against each other and scale the pods with like that. So it's the time to decide whether you need to invest into your own infrastructure or not is reduced. You can delay that decision point because you can scale these systems easier since they are autonomous. So with that, I would like to end my presentation and would like to introduce Morris Phelan to you. Morris leads the global bioprocess services business at GE Healthcare. His global teams provide consulting, process development, clinical and scientific services, and expertise on a wide variety of applications to support large-scale manufacturing of biopharmaceuticals. Prior to GE, Morris worked as a principal at BioPharma Solve, providing consulting and professional services. From 1993 to 2011, Morris was the Director of Global Compliance Services and Regulatory Affairs, as well as the Director of Bioprocess Services for Merck KGaA and Merck Millipore. He was educated at the National University of Ireland. He moved to the US in 1987, where he began his career as a researcher at Harvard Medical School and Children's Hospital, Boston. Morris, with that, I would like to hand it over to you. Thank you.
Hi, Mike. Thanks very much. And Joanne and the team, thanks very much for asking me to join today. I know we don't have a lot of time, so I just thought I'd walk us through some of the areas in which technology is advancing around flexible biopharma manufacturing, and then underline and maybe provoke some back and forth questions from the viewing audience on some of the things that I think are key considerations around an area which I've spent a lot of time working in, which is qualification, validation, and sort of approval of these technologies. I'm sorry, Mike. So yeah, I mean, since we don't have much time, this is a picture of a fully flexible monoclonal antibody manufacturing suite that I actually run as part of my operations today. And this is, to Mike's point, it's a 2,000-liter reactor with full downstream purification process, which produces, drug substance for clinical studies. And you'll see many versions of this kind of a setup, but I think the real point here is that there is so much more that can be done today at the 2,000-liter scale, and all of the exciting stuff that we, for example, in my teams and my global teams and at GE are working on are around emerging market opportunities, who are working on antibody development and manufacturing at these kind of scales. So just wanted to underscore kind of the point that looking forward, this is really where it's at. And so qualification, understanding what the pathway is for flexible technologies would be very, very important. And it's extremely important to understand it from the outset so that you don't get caught with tough questions and a lot of work to do as you're producing a product for clinic or producing a product for the marketplace. I think the point of this slide here is just to say that across all of the unit operations, whether it's preparative, whether it's in cell culture, classical upstream, whether it's in downstream purification, QC labs, or even specialty labs where characterization of these biologics is going on, and indeed plant-wide, there are flexible solutions right across the entire process now. And so some of the big questions around this are, we are bringing this technology and it's great, but we're also introducing a range of new product contact surfaces. And so from a point of view of things like leachables and extractables and what is the chemistry of my product with these surfaces, those questions need to be understood and answered as you move through taking full advantage of the next generation of technologies. I think there are several areas, and some of you may be familiar about these areas, but certainly many of you, me for sure, makes enormous use of bioprocess containers of all shapes and sizes, 2D, 3D bags, tubing manifolds, transfer technologies, storage bags, which go now up into the thousands of liters. And again, the utility of these types of systems, regardless of what you're using it for, starts with understanding the criticality of the operation that it's participating in, and then what is the level of understanding of the materials, what level of control do you need to exercise over the suppliers of these materials, and basically how do you characterize the systems that you're using in order to be able to take full advantage of them and make sure that the thinking behind their utility and the thinking behind the advantages that are brought by flexibility and single use can be realized. Here's some examples of connector technology, and these are becoming widely used and invaluable in both the manufacturing, the critical transfer operations that need to occur, that typically would have been handled between transfer panels which required aseptic connections, even between rooms. In the facilities that Mike was showing us at the beginning, a lot of the wall segregation goes away, but an awful lot of the ability to remove that segregation is enabled by these types of technologies. And again, the key thing here is that even though some of us have been working with these technologies for a few years now, and some maybe several years, relative to the classical stainless steel infrastructure and all of the sampling and transfer that's conducted around those traditional systems, this is all still very new, and it's really new when you're trying to map regulatory requirements, qualification requirements, and also the product characterization requirements around these new flexible technologies. I think it's so it's very important to think about what the approach is going to be as you're developing your strategy, and it's even more important to understand sourcing issues, where these plastic materials are sourced, and often in the world of supply chain, we like to understand things like one layer back or maybe even two layers back, but it is important to make sure that you understand the supply chain that goes into these terrific technologies, so that your process can be characterized and matches up well against what the conventional expectations would be. I think, there are a lot of things to consider, and I've touched on a few of them, but at the center of the entire discussion around implementing new technologies is the question of, do you shift patient safety, or do you shift the risks that are being taken around ultimately delivering a safe and effective drug to the patient by transferring and going to a new platform, a new technology, and that requires a core understanding of the process, of the product, and then around aspects of product, availability. But very quickly in the next layer, process control, control strategies, and supplier strategies are also extremely important. And understanding core impacts of moving to a new platform, despite the fact that it has a compelling kind of an advantage from a flexibility and the obvious utilities of single use, it needs to be traceable back to a quality and patient upside, and then it's married up against business drivers. Built in is a qualification strategy, how it's implemented in your manufacturing, and then how it integrates with really the rest of what goes on in the process in order to release a safe and effective drug. A lot of what's driving flexible manufacturing technologies, the uptake in flexible manufacturing technologies and single use, certainly is the emergence of biosimilar drugs, the emergence, the sort of impending patent cliff around these drugs, and certainly emerging markets and what's going on out there. Global healthcare reforms, which are putting asking serious questions of the biopharmaceutical manufacturing community about lowering the cost of patient care and lowering the cost of drugs. Flexible, smaller plants are becoming absolutely real as a result of very, very efficient and highly productive cell culture processes. With all of the plastic that comes along with the advantages and the utility of flexible manufacturing, comes a burden around qualification and around the chemistry of these new product contact surfaces. And there are many organizations and many teams of technical folks who are thinking deeply about this right now. And vaccine growth in the emerging markets also. So all of these sort of macro, or many of these macro drivers are sort of conspiring to make it a no-brainer that these technologies and these type of platforms are the future of biopharma manufacturing, particularly in the markets that are most active. And so with that comes a whole new challenge and a whole new discussion around how we qualify, how we validate, and how we benchmark these new platforms against what's conventional and what everybody's comfortable with. I think the last piece of the puzzle and some of the most interesting kind of parallel work that's going on around, if you like, the flexible revolution, is how we are all starting to just tip the iceberg on utilizing and understanding what all of the data that we are producing, that we're collecting, and that we have in our own hands right now. And at GE for sure, there's a massive emphasis right now being put on understanding and maximizing analytics, so that we can aggregate and understand all of the data that we've got, and then take that data and effectively use it to our complete advantage in biomanufacturing, in product quality, in process efficiency, and in regulatory and quality compliance. So, and we've got a long way to go in biopharma. You know, it's really just at the very beginning stage, in terms of the amount of data that's being shared, in terms of the amount of data that we produce versus the amount of data that we're actively using, and how we treat data. I think, just to give you an example from the industrial world, GE, many of you might be familiar with these wind turbines and wind farms. More data is collected from one blade of those wind turbines every single day, and then it's used so that the next cycle of power generation is optimized. But there's more data collected from one of those blades than there is from than is transferred every day all over the entire Twitter network. And so I'm not saying that we need to jump to that, but we certainly will be going to a new generation, along with next generation manufacturing platforms, will be going to truly smart manufacturing, where we're marrying up data and analytics capability with optimized distribution, using the best minds to throw at the analyses of this data, and all of that will get poured into these flexible solutions to make them even better, even better investments, and more importantly, higher quality, and ultimately probably lower cost alternatives for patients. So that's sort of the food for thought that I wanted to share with everybody. And thanks, Mike.
Thank you very much. Thanks a lot, Morris. With that, I would like to introduce to you our next speaker, George Weicker. He's the Vice President, U.S. Life Science and Chemical Market Segment Lead of M&W Group, has more than 25 years of experience in the development of cGMP manufacturing facilities. He often leads the programming and conceptual design for projects, analyzing and developing process flows, operational ergonomics, compliance drivers, as well as incorporating new industry trends. His experience also includes managing and designing pharmaceutical and biotechnology projects from concept through construction to validation and turnover of various types throughout Americas, Europe, and Asia. George is a contributing author and lecturer, providing insights, trends, and ideas, concepts to user groups and industry professionals, along with being an active speaker at industry events such as the Society of Bioprocess Professionals, ISPE, ASME, and Barnet International. He received his Bachelor of Science of Architecture at Temple University. With that, I would like to hand over the panel to George. Thank you.
Very good, Mike. Thank you very much, and thank you everyone for joining us today for this webinar presentation here. I'd like to take a few minutes here and talk with you about modularity and what kind of value it can offer as an execution model as you seek to develop a new bioprocess and pharmaceutical manufacturing capacity in the marketplace. So the question begs itself, is it a value or not? And the short answer is that yes, it is a value, that in the end you can look at the idea of modularity really being able to provide value from an execution standpoint. The first two bullets there are particular importance to the business minds who want to look at modularity and say, really, what does it give me at the end of the day? And what it does provide to an execution model is the ability to accelerate the schedule very rapidly. And in doing so, and in getting into manufacturing even earlier, one can realize a better net present value as a result. And as Mike touched on earlier, the predictability of a better outcome is also in play when you look at modular components and modular systems that can be implemented into an overall execution model that also provide a holistic solution here. So all these things that we look at in the world of modularity today really drive ourselves towards the efficient and repeatable approach. And inevitably, as your business grows and changes, you can also look at bolting on capacity as needed when needed. So you're not pre-investing for infrastructure, rather you're waiting to make that investment later on as your business grows, and thus your operations can expand accordingly. And frankly, while keeping operations up and running. So your goal would be, as business grows, to keep the business running and expand as you need to. And this touches more on that. I mean, basically at the end of the day, if you can look at implementing a modular execution approach and get into business earlier, you can realize an overall better cash flow in your operations. And that's the really benefit that modularity provides. And when you convert that into a net present value assessment, one could say that, honestly speaking, that maybe modularity comes at a cost. In this case here, this model for the net present value comparison shows a stick frame project costing $8 million versus a modular facility costing $8.4 million. At the same time, though, we're able to realize a much accelerated approach on modularity, realizing a roughly 12-month time frame for the execution of the project versus up to 24 months. And so when you equate that down to a net present value comparison, you're seeing a significant value in the ability to get up and running earlier than you could otherwise do that by using a modular system approach. And that's the real essence of modularity as I see it today, and the benefit that it can provide, coupled with what Morris was talking about relative to single-use technologies. The ability to bring in the equipment that Morris showed that can be sort of plug and play in theory and up and running very quickly to realize the overall operational system. And so in terms of execution here, we can see the traditional approach up top, which is more or less a segmented approach. You design the facility, you go to permit, you buy all the parts and pieces, you build it, and then you commission and qualify to get to an operationally ready state. With modularity, now we can look at the idea of really taking everything and going from what I would call day zero or point of sale and being able to execute elements in parallel sequence. At day zero, when you commit to buy or build a facility, Morris can get his equipment up and in manufacturing and fabrication for you very rapidly. Meanwhile, we're building modules that can be developed and set into a building shell or even become the building shell for that matter. And then by using modularity as well, we can also look at the idea of having standardized C&Q templates and being able to carry the FAT, SAT, and commissioning data more efficiently forward to minimize their overall durations and even overlap some of the sequence of events there. In the spectrum of modularity, it's quite broad now, and the good thing is there are many options out there. If you're looking at sort of the left-hand side of the screen there, you see companies like Daldrop and AES being able to provide you clean room panels that are then fabricated on site. Through the spectrum of those panels and systems being integrated with process systems. For Biologics Modular and PharmaDual, they can actually provide building modules or building components. GCON has a modular system that can actually be integrated with process systems and even moved around and redeployed around the site. And ending up with actually GE Healthcare now with its Cubio initiative, where you can actually buy a complete bioprocess plant that can be set into a greenfield or brownfield site very quickly and very efficiently, providing complete turnkey operation. So the message here is that the good thing is that there is a great variety of options out there right now as we begin to really implement modularity, I would say, on a normal basis or kind of regular basis in the development of new facilities out there. So along with the idea of being able to build modulars, I think is also important to think modular too. And thinking modular to me also would drive us toward the idea of standardizing our design modules and design thinking here. So you can see here an example of what we developed at M&W is called a life cell. And the life cell idea is really centered around the idea of being able to sit with a client and very rapidly model a process operation. In this case here, you can see this is an XDR 2000 with all supporting equipment around it, and that can basically become a dialogue tool that we can sit with a client and very rapidly develop an entire process model, and then within a very short period of time, be it a couple of days or even as much as a week, model a process and be able to begin to determine how that process could be configured in a context that may exist or a brand new building shell, for example. And then you can take that idea then and even begin to ratchet it up and look at, basically modeling the process first, and then even taking it to the extent of being able to standardize rooms. In this case here, this is a life cell for a gown room. And the ability to now take all these pieces and components and plug them together and more or less, build a modular system by design initially that can then lead you very rapidly to a modular overall execution program that can then be assessed very rapidly, because the idea is by having the equipment assessments already done, the cost of the equipment. By having modular systems here that you see for rooms, we now can get the cost and basic functional operations around those understood and clarified. So we have a very good picture at the end of the day of how that facility may look and how it may operate. So really, just to kind of summarize the overall approach, I think, as Mike said earlier, the ability to commit to spend later. Inevitably, clients today want to wait till the very last minute to spend the money because they want to make sure it's the right investment to make. So by using a modular approach and accelerating the overall project schedule, we can now look at spending money later in the overall development of a product, or get to market quicker by using modular systems here. It also mitigates risk. It's important to note here that by using modular systems that are built in a factory and already sort of pre-engineered and copy smart approach, you can basically mitigate risk by not having to deal with contingency that you otherwise would have to deal with if you didn't have a known outcome for all those components. And certainly, and inevitably, with modularity comes efficiency. So in terms of the ability to benefit operations, the maintenance folks, repeatability as well, it's very important to think of modularity not only from a small component or a building module, but also the entire operation and how we can begin to make things very efficient by design and construction and operation. And along the way, too, comes the ability to, with the technologies that Morris showed earlier, is to, in my opinion, reduce the FTE count. If you can reduce the number of full-time employees by 10% or so by using an efficient process system set into an efficient building structure or building operation, you can really begin to drive down your operational costs as well as a result. And then, as Mike said earlier, and Morris touched on it briefly as well, is the idea of repeatability. The ability to basically build a plant and then copy smart. As companies today look to globalize and begin to develop infrastructure in country for country manufacturing, the ability to develop a model and basically be able to repeat that model is a very important feature as you go forward and develop your capacity, even nationally or worldwide. So that's where I am right now. I just want to give you a quick presentation on modularity. I hope that was helpful to you. And with that, I'll pass it back over to Mike.
And I'll pass it over to Joanne. Thank you very much, George.
Very good.
Hello there. This is Joanne Gear again. Thank you, gentlemen. That was a terrific overview. We have some interesting questions coming through, and I will bring them up. The first one is flexible manufacturing implemented more for converting current facilities than for new greenfield projects? Thanks. Who would like to take that on? I think that's a really interesting question. Is it efficient, I guess, is the question, to take an existing process and move it toward modularity?
I think it is. This is George here to say that we've actually done it in the past. Imagine if you have legacy stainless steel processing and you want to begin to explore and implement the idea of single-use technology in a plant that exists. Using the sort of lifestyle approach that we showed earlier there, you can begin to take those systems and begin to integrate them and overlay them into a facility that may exist already with stainless steel processing. So you can thereby look at maintenance of legacy products, but also looking forward at the new technologies that may be able to make you more efficient in your manufacturing operations.
Yeah, I have to agree with that. I think this is Mike. I think it's the beauty with single-use technology and also with the modularity or with the clean room structures, prefab clean room structures we see, and the hopeful standardization of these systems also, you have a whole array of options which you can pull as a tool out of the toolbox. And we've seen definitely when it comes to redesigning facilities, it's not just redesigning facilities but also new facilities, and both are possible. And you talk about, for example, aging facilities There's a PDA task force on aging facilities. And what do you do with aging facilities, and how can we optimize and refurbish these type of facilities? And I think, again, what George showed is you can utilize these type of systems also and implement it into these aging structures, as well as the single-use technology.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Look, I think the key thing here is there are obvious places where the technologies win, and it's as I said a no-brainer. If you understand what it costs you to run a facility that's basically run on stainless steel mixing tanks, for example, for your buffer systems, it's very obvious where you get where the upside comes from. It's very obvious how the continuity of your operations can be impacted by having flexible systems, or even buying standard buffer preparations that come in flexible containers. I think for me, it's all about what outcome do you understand enough about where your process really will be impacted, and then evaluating those, the opportunity to bring those types of technologies in.
And to that point, Morris, I think, when you think about it, for example, a typical 1,000-liter tank, and you talked about buffer, and I think it's a great example, media or buffer, or any kind of like whole tank, 1,000-liter. It takes 8 hours, a whole shift, to dismantle the tank, to clean the tank, to assemble it, to sterilize it. So, I've been in the past, when I worked for the process equipment side, I looked at some of the facilities and some of the processes. They ran out of WFI to clean the tanks, for example, and also, again, 8 hours. That's a shift. When you
Yeah,
can implement a 1,000-liter bag instead of keeping that 1,000-liter tank, it makes absolute sense. You look at the turnaround time of that, and maybe get even one more batch out of that process. Would create
exactly.
a tremendous amount of opportunity.
Okay.
Thank you. I think we have another interesting question here. How does one kick off procurement in parallel with design? Doesn't the design need to be final before the procurement group starts?
That's a great question. So the idea around using modular systems is the ability to be able to use pre-engineered and pre-designed components. Let's take, for example, the process system. I do believe that if you went to Morris and said, I have a 2,000-liter monoclonal antibody process, that within a very short period of time, you could map out that process with Morris and the team and be able to commit to buy that very quickly. In parallel with that, we can look at modular systems, building modules like GCON or GE Healthcare, and then also other systems, and those can be purchased as well early on in the process. And then as you begin to put it together, then that final design component, maybe that last 10%, if you will, can be the integration of all those modular components and systems and put it together. So in the end, the engineer becomes the integrator and facilitator of putting these modular systems together to complete the overall process in development.
And I think we can actually go this far.
Yeah, I mean, I think the exception is if you, sorry.
We can go this far that in instances, these systems could also be leased. So not when you talk about procurement, yes, you know your process, you know where the natural breakpoints are in your process, and you design the clean rooms around these natural breakpoints, and then procure the clean room structures and the equipment. And in some instances, the equipment actually takes longer to get than clean rooms nowadays. But the other part is also, when it comes to procurement, what we see more and more is that the industry don't want to have the assets any longer on their books, and more leasing options come also out and are available. And I think that's another point which we will see more in future, that clients want to either lease or finance the whole system.
Yeah, and the third part of the discussion is um, maximizing the return on investment and maximizing the efficiency returns and the process cycling return and really the utility of these plants through flexible modular systems means that you've got to find a balance between what you really need from a design and customized point of view and standardized parts. It's much easier for everybody to, for example, I have well, my team, not me, but my team has a iPad configurator, which they can actually design an entire end-to-end 2,000-liter monoclonal antibody process with standard equipment. Now, there are design aspects which could push the procurement out because they're not standard, but at the end of the day, that balance between what you'd really love to have and what you really need needs to be understood to get the most out of these things and collapse the procurement cycle.
Great. We have another great question here regarding analytics. To what extent has genomics been used by GE or others to select the best conditions or variants to make bioproducts?
You know, I think we're right on the verge of some of that stuff. We're doing some very interesting work in what it's called multi-omics, where we're using genomic profiling to do predictions of disease states, et cetera. But we really haven't gotten there yet. But we're starting to put these programs in place to do predictive analytics on bioprocesses and then roll that information back into the next iteration of the bioprocess.
Okay, is there anyone else want to comment on that question?
No, that would actually push me out onto thin ice.
Me too.
We have a few more minutes. Is there anything that any of the three of you have not had a chance to explore that you think is important to bring into the discussion? Or that you'd like to challenge each other with? I know you know each other well, so now's your time.
No, I've basically had a great career not challenging Mike, so now's not the time.
I think when we look at the three presentations, all three are different, but they are totally synchronized as such. I mean, we did not these presentations together. We did them independently, but as you can see, they're of three different organizations, global organizations, and those speaking really blowing into the same horn, and therefore I think it's not the challenge, it's what I appreciate is the vision of these three organizations to see the call for more flexibility within not just processes. I mean, processes, the flexibility is really there nowadays because single-use technology very much gets established in not just new processes, but also into existing processes. But from a facility standpoint, we're not there yet, but the call is out there. Flexible facilities are required. What do we do in future with different applications? We didn't talk about, like, for example, containment of conjugated antibodies, but we all know that there's a need for containment, there's a need for higher flexibility, there's a need for smaller, more agile facilities, even coming from the FDA, from the regulators. I mean, you've seen the papers of Janet Woodcock, and so all three of us you know, answer that type of call, and we will see a very rapid development, in my opinion, in the flexibility of processes in conjunction with clean room structures as well as facility structures. And that'll enhance the industry. That'll make the industry so much more flexible and responsive.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I also think that that you know, as we move into real sophisticated treatment of all of this data um, that is being generated or that we have access to, we're going to get a much more um, a much better understanding quantitatively of where the real risks are and where the real and how it can be mitigated, because it'll be it's analytic risk analytics, if you like. Today we do an awful lot of I would say scorecards around risk, and we need to really unleash the horsepower on this data to get so that we can focus in and extract where we really need to work to take risk out.
Yeah, I agree, Morris, and I think it's important to note too that we're still in the up curve of this technology development here. I'll be very curious to see how the landscape looks, 5 years from now, as we've gone from the 10,000 liter scale stainless steel reactors to 2,000 single use, and what's in the future for us? Is it a 30 liter perfusion process that's continuous? And so I think it's important. I'm certainly glad that we have a great attendance today here, because it's important to keep up with the technology as it develops, and to be able to understand the risks, as you said, and look ahead at new opportunities to make it even more efficient as the marketplace becomes more competitive and biosimilars become more broadly utilized and we globalize further manufacturing capacity here. So certainly a good discussion point.
Yeah, and again, Morris, to your point, it's such a great topic you bring up, and I think in a way, I mean, maybe I'm not up to date with it, but I think the sensor technology could be also improved in we have a great sensor technology in single-use technology, but I think we can do better, and there can be more better sensors out there. And then, as you said, bringing all these data together, because when we look at cars, I mean, if you look at a car nowadays, it takes like hundreds of data sets and works with these hundreds of data sets. And it would be great if we could do the same thing to control our processes, our biopharmaceutical processes, in a better way, and have, you know, immediate answers to some of the outliers which happen, or have immediate answers if some, instead of like looking at trending, that we really have an answer that when something goes wrong. And I think it becomes actually even more important when we talk about continuous or perfusion systems and continuous manufacturing.
Thank you. We have time. We have two questions that are somewhat allied, so I'm going to ask them both, and you can discuss both of them. One is, what is the average square footage of modular space being built? And the other is this flexible, single-use modular approach being deployed mainly in North America and Europe? Is it being rolled out to emerging markets such as well as BRIC?
Well,
Yes.
this
Two good
Morris.
questions there.
Sorry.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay, that's one of the disadvantages of not being together. But I mean, yes, I mean we are actually building a fully modular, flexible manufacturing facility, kind of as we described in the presentation, but in Asia as we speak. I think conventionally, I mean, there is so much cell culture, for want of a better word, tankage, whether it's owned by the innovators or whether it's owned by contract manufacturers today, that the ramp will probably be very quick, relatively speaking, in emerging markets. But in parallel with that, there is huge interest from the large kind of headliner clients and customers of ours in the next generation platform, the factory of the future, and the scale and flexibility that needs to be built into that. And so that's what we're working with those guys in the kind of well-developed and well-understood marketplaces now.
And what kind of size are these facilities?
They are, you know, because they're modular and because you're no longer dealing with 6 times 12.5K bioreactors, and you're dealing with 2K bioreactors or 3 2K bioreactors, you've gone from several 100,000 square feet to you know, several tens of thousands of square feet. So it's order of magnitude difference.
And you know, the question I think was also, what's the clean room space of these modular systems? And I can only talk about the GCON pods, and which have their own air handling system in it. So there's a size limitation because we don't want to interconnect the pods to a pharma-dual type system. So the pods itself, they have a clean room space which can go from 300 square foot to 1,000 square foot, and these pods would then represent a unit operation within a process, and whatever the facility is or is required, again, that depends what kind of a facility we talk about. And as Morris said, that we're talking probably about several 10,000 square foot instead of these large systems. But the clean room pod itself, 300 square foot to 1,000 square foot. And yes, I mean, the interest is there from North America to really global, because when we talk about in-country, for-country facilities, 2,000-liter MAP facilities, very often they are in Asia, and they are deployed in the Middle East as well as in Brazil.
Well, thank you. If we can take a final comment from the three of you, if there's something you'd like to say in closure. I think it's been a great discussion. Mike, do you have anything you'd like to share as we close?
I would like to thank George and Morris, and as I said beforehand, I would just reiterate that we've done these presentations independently, but it shows that the good news is that one listens, or we all listen to the trends of the industry, and I think we showed a glimpse what the future will hold.
Lovely. Anyone else like to say anything?
I just thanks very much. I think it was a excellent discussion, and if you see, you know, a lot of the headline conferences that are coming up in the sort of in the fall season have a lot of what we talked about on their agendas and on their bills. So I think this is a subject that is going to be front and center over the next several years. So thanks very much, and that was great. And this technology really works well.
Thank
Yeah,
you,
I certainly
Morris.
agree.
Go
Morris,
ahead, George.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Just to echo Morris's point there, I would also encourage everyone to get involved. You know, as this new technology matures and develops and becomes a normal, you know, practice for all of us out there, is to continue to be involved, continue to ask questions, and I always strive for the idea of using modularity in a safe, practical way that can be standardized. Why redesign equipment every time? Go with a standard design approach and stick with it, and with the eye on being on safe manufacturing, that's done very effectively from a cost standpoint. So thanks everyone for joining today. I really appreciate it.
Well, beautiful. Thank you to all of our speakers. Thank you to everyone in the audience. We really appreciate it. You'll be hearing from us in the day or so with a link for the recording, and with some other lively things that are coming up. I already have notes here from my staff thinking, I think we need to do more programs on this topic. So you'll definitely be hearing from us again. Thank you, everyone. Have a good afternoon.